Hey friends, I'm Bree. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm here to do my February reading wrap up. So I get it, there are still 2 days left in the month of February and I will probably do some reading within those 2 days. However, it is final exams week for school and I have both of my tests scheduled for early Saturday morning. So who knows what's going to happen. I might just binge a bunch of Hallmark movies that I have recorded. But if I do some reading, I will just tack those onto my March reading wrap up. If you're new to my channel, how I like to do my reading wrap ups is to just go through what I've read pretty quickly. My intentions are to keep these videos as short as possible as to not take too much of you guys' time away, especially because throughout the month I do my reading vlogs as well as my currently reading videos where I try to keep you updated with what I'm currently in the middle of as well as what my recently reads are. So I don't want to rehash a bunch of thoughts over books that I know that I've talked about previously. So as of today, I've read 25 books in the month of February. I'm really proud of myself. I will say that February feels like one of the most fun reading months that I've had in a very long time. And I'm very excited to kind of continue to challenge myself to outdo how I have felt while reading this month. I really just kind of went with my gut with my reading. If I picked up a book and I knew instantly that I wasn't feeling it, I would just put it aside and move on to something else. And being a big romance reader, I will say I was also in the mood for food memoirs and I just feel like it was a nice change of pace. I would get really excited about reading a food memoir and I would read that and then that would get me excited to read more romance. So then I would spend like the next 2 or 3 reads, they would be romance reads, and it just, I feel like it was the perfect balance. So let's get into the reads. The very first book that I read this month was Save Me the Plums, my gourmet memoir by Ruth Reichl. Following that, I read Hart's Hollow Farm by Janet Dailey. This was my first Janet Dailey romance and it really took me by surprise. It was a small town romance and I was very much in the mood for a small town romance. I was expecting it to be really sweet, and while it was sweet, it was also really heavy as well. She handled some family issues really well, I feel like, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm really looking forward to reading some more Janet Dailey. Marriage on Madison Avenue, which is book 3 in Lauren Layne's Central Park Pact series. I'm really sad that this series is over with. However, I feel like Audrey and Clark's romance was the perfect way to round this series out. Following that, I read The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa. This was my first Mia Sosa romance, and I will say I have chatted with a couple of romance reading friends over on Instagram and who are not fans of this book. So just kind of go into it with low expectations, and if you're surprised and blown away in the end like me, then great. However, people are having some issues with the book, specifically the heroine Carolina. She is super petty in this book. I'm not gonna lie. Homegirl is very petty to the hero Max in this book, and it is unfair. Like, he's not really the one that did anything wrong to her, but for whatever reason, she takes it out on him. So keep in mind that it is a romance that is kind of hit or miss for people right now. Next, I read Wildflower by Barrymore. I really enjoyed this. I will say I listened to it on audio and I don't think the audiobook is necessarily for everyone. If you're interested in reading it, definitely pick it up. It was a really fun read. And even if you want to give the audiobook a try, I will say do so, but tread lightly. She narrates it herself. She's very animated. She yells and screams and cusses, and I know that that could definitely bother some people. Some of the reviews that I read on Goodreads, people did have issues with that. So just keep that in mind. If you want to read it, I definitely think it is worth the read, but the audiobook I don't feel like is necessarily everyone's cup of tea or shot of Henny. Next, I read Kitchen Yarns, Notes on Life, Love, and Food by Anne Hood. This was such a really sweet, cozy food memoir. I absolutely loved it. I feel like if you're in the mood for a food memoir and just a woman sharing her story and reflecting on life and love and intertwining her love of food in there, amazing Italian recipes, I really think this is a good place to start. Next, I read Awakened by Boyce, which is book 1 in her Oracle Chronicles series. I am so rooting for this series. I've really wanted to read more paranormal fantasy romances, and this one has a woman of color as the heroine. Like, I just loved it so much. It reads very much like the first book in a series. It's definitely setting up what's to come, but I really enjoyed it. It's a really quick read. It was less than like 260 something pages. If you're in the mood for a good paranormal fantasy romance series to kind of get started in, and that's still fairly new, I think there may be 3 or 4 books out, I highly recommend giving this one a try. Next, I read The Story of Us, and this is by Teri Wilson. This was my first by this author. It's a Hallmark published novel, and it was just unapologetically sweet and charming, and I really adored it. Next, I read The Perfect Escape by Suzanne Park. Unfortunately, this one was a letdown. My issue with this book was really just with the advertising, which I don't think is necessarily any fault of the authors. I'm not really sure how all of that stuff works, but the way that it's advertised, you just pick it up like it's going to be this fun romantic comedy, and it really wasn't fun, and I didn't really understand where the comedy part of the romance actually was coming from. The saving grace was the hero. I absolutely adored the hero. I loved the Korean representation in this one. It is an Own Voices young adult novel, but yeah, I just had some issues. Like, I went into it in the mood for one thing, and that's not what I got. Next, I read Sweet Little Lies by Jill Shalvis, Temporary Wife Temptation by Jayci Lee, Lucky Suit by Lauren Blakely, Cowboy Courage by Carolyn Brown, Grow Something by Christina Jones, Beyond Time by J.A. Armstrong, The Reader by Amy Hest. I take my youngest to the library or the bookstore quite a bit throughout the week, and every time we go, he plays, and while he's playing, I will pick up little children's books and read them aloud to him, and we read this one. If you have little readers in your life, this is so sweet. The artwork is beautiful. I'm always amazed at how beautiful the artwork in children's books are. This is just simply about a little boy. I don't know if it's a snow day or if he's not quite school age yet, but it's snowing outside, and him and his dog, they go outside. He puts a book in a suitcase. They get on their sled and they go to the top of this hill, and when they get to the top of the hill, he reads a book, and then once they have the book finished, he sleds back down the hill and they go home. Like, it's so simple, but I just really enjoyed the story, and the artwork was amazing. So again, if you have little readers in your life, this one is definitely worth the read. Next, I read Big Bad Cowboy by Carly Bloom, Garlic and Sapphires by Ruth Reichl. This was my second Ruth Reichl this month, and I think I preferred this one a little bit more. So I will say, if she is a memoirist that you're interested in checking out, I think I slightly preferred this one a little bit more to Save Me the Plums. This was her experience of being a food critic and going to different restaurants in disguise, and it's just such a fascinating look from a reviewer's standpoint of the different experiences of going to certain restaurants. There are certain restaurants that she pinpoints. Your experience really depends on who you are. Obviously, if you're someone of importance, you're going to get treated totally different than like a Midwestern housewife. Like, it was so eye-opening. I absolutely love the way that she talks about food. Highly recommend picking this one up. So now we're at the part of the month where I like literally had a day and I was like, you know what? We're just gonna put all responsibilities aside and just listen to whatever I can get my hands on Audible Escape. So I listened to like 6 books, I think, in one day. So we started off with The Christmas Pact by Vi Keeland, Delayed Satisfaction by Lauren Blakely, Scrooged by Vi Keeland, The Trouble with Caasi by Debbie Macomber. So this one is a Debbie Macomber classic. They're like putting some of her classics out with different covers, and this is some of them I've really enjoyed, but I will say one thing that I've noticed with her classics is I'm not always a fan of the heroes. The way that I felt about this one is the way that I felt about a previous one that I read. The hero was just a complete jerk for no reason. Like, it was unbearable sometimes. So just keep that in mind. Again, this audiobook was like 4 hours long, so it's a really quick read, but I did have some issues with it, unfortunately. A Pinch of Sugar by Jessa Kane, Monster Prick by Kendall Ryan, and A Dash of Spice by Jessa Kane. I am really loving Jessa Kane's novels. I don't think her kink necessarily is for everybody. Even me loving her, it does take me to warm up a little bit to kind of the different things that she puts in her stories, but they're still a lot of fun. Like, I've literally, both of those I read at like 2 o'clock in the morning when I couldn't sleep, and I read them like in one sitting. They're like 70 pages long. So that is what I read in the month of February. I would love to know what you guys have been reading, what you've been enjoying. Let me know what your favorite read was this month. I would love to hear. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Have a great day. Bye.